In today's video, we're going to add one more cutscene action, which allows us to move our player in our cutscenes. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own AARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. Okay, so this next type of cutscene action is kind of the most important one that we're going to add to our game, and it's going to be the final true one that we're going to add. We'll add some maybe small additional things in the next video like music and some other fun polish to this system, but this moving our player character is probably the most important one, right? Now, I had mentioned previously that there might be a few ways to do this, I think in a previous video, and I approached it in two primary ways. And the first one that I tried was, let's just move the player directly. Like, can I just manually change the input or something along those lines? And while I could come up with some solutions that kind of worked for that, you could override it with the player controller, and it was just getting really hairy. And so I kind of abandoned that approach. And then I opted for an alternate approach where I created a duplicate of the player's sprite sheet, complete with his animations, and then I just kind of moved that around. And that actually worked quite well. Also, I had to do things like hide the player and then create this new node and move it. And when it was done, show the player again. The major drawback with that approach, however, was that it was hard to keep the player in sync with the state of this, fake player, the dummy player that I was moving. And so then I had an idea, and it was kind of a hybrid of the two. And so what I've settled on, it's not the most robust approach, but it's pretty good. And it's creating a custom state for our player. So our player will have a cutscene state, and when we enter a dialogue, he'll enter the cutscene state. And from that state, we can manipulate the player, change his animations, and do things like that. And he can't leave the state, and so we're going to make sure he doesn't get any input while he's in that state. And it'll allow us to control him. It removes the need to kind of sync other things. And, once we're done with the cutscene, we'll just drop him back into the idle state. And so that's the approach we're going to take, and let's get started. Okay, first couple of setup things. I want to do what we did last time where we made this unique icon. So let's see, I'm going to come down here and hopefully I've got these. Okay, I'm going to take the icon with the little person, the actor. I'm going to duplicate that and we'll call it CutsceneActionPlayer. And then I'm going to open this in Notepad++ and we'll adjust the color and make it have a green background. Okay, so in here, we've got our linear gradient defined, line 14, and we're gonna start and stop on some green colors. So if you're doing hexadecimal values, make sure you start with a pound or hashtag, and then it's RGB. So the first two values of the hexadecimal value are the red. We're gonna put those as 0. Green, I'm gonna put them as full, and then blue. Actually, you know what? Some greens look nice with a little bit of red. Let's put these at like 3. And these don't have to be the same 2 digits. That just makes it easy because otherwise, unless you're like a hexadecimal wizard, I don't know how you're going to get these colors exact. But, I've done it long enough with web development that I kind of know the colors I want. Probably don't need a lot of blue. So I'm going to go ahead and just put 0 on the blue. Now for the other stop, I think technically stop 1 should be maybe the darker color. So I'm going to go with 0, 0. And then I'm going to just do like AA00. Let's go ahead and save that. And if I got that close to right, it should look okay. Hey, there we go. I actually got it in reverse. It's darker on top and lighter on the bottom. And I actually like that color on top. So this lighter one right here, this is the bottom. So let's make this, I don't know. I do want some red in there. I'm going to make that AA. And then, no, this is the top here. So it should be maybe be brighter. I'm getting all mixed up. So okay, just a little green thing. Okay, we're going to use that for our icon. Let's go ahead and create now that script that we're going to use here for our cutscene action because we're going to need one of those. And in order to do this quickly, I'm going to just open this cutscene action camera. Let's see, is that the one I want to base it off of? Actually, you know what? Let's take the cutscene action move. I think this one might work better. Yeah, let's take this cutscene action move and we'll duplicate this one. So I'm going to find that in the file system, duplicate this, call it _player, and let's open that guy up. Make sure it has that unique class name before we break it, right? And then let's change, of course, the name of our icon that we're referencing. And now I'm going to save this and I'm going to go ahead and reload my project and then add one. We'll add one to the scene once we get back. So project, reload current project. Okay, back in the project here, I'm just going to make sure I'm in my cutscene test scene. So do this wherever you're building your cutscene. And I'm just going to add, and I'm going to type player in here. And we should see, there we go, CutsceneActionPlayer. Create one of those. And voila, I'm going to put it on the top of my stack. And now we should be good to test it. Okay, now before we build this script here for this, this new cutscene type for our player, we need to go to our player and we need to create this state that I mentioned. So I'm going to come in here into my player state machine. I'm going to add a node, and it's just a regular node. Okay. And I'm going to call this node, we'll call it cutscene. So this is the cutscene state is more or less what this will be. Cutscene. I have a feeling I'm going to spell it that way a lot today. We'll see. And then let's just look at our idle script. Go ahead and open that and show it in the file system. That's just my preferred way of finding these things once the project gets big. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that script. We'll call it state underscore cutscene. Ooh, I almost spelled cutscene. Stop myself in the nick of time. Okay, here we go. I'm going to drag this on here. Let's open this script. Okay, so we've got the script assigned to the cutscene node. It's in our state machine. It needs to have a unique name like that. And let's go ahead and build this state. And what does it need to do? And it will virtually do nothing. Its primary purpose is to prevent the player from doing anything else while we are in a cutscene. Okay, that's going to be the main purpose. So what that means is like we'll stop his movement. We won't play any animations. We won't respond to inputs. We also want to enable the player so that he can be unpaused while this state is active. Because remember, when we enter dialogues and cutscenes, we pause the game. Okay, so this can unpause the player. And up here, we've got references to other states. The only state we're going to need on this one is the idle state. So I'm going to just bring that in here. Okay, because that's the state we're going to transition to when the cutscene ends. We are going to want to use our init function in this one. So I'm going to set that up here. If you recall, all of our states should have an init function that gets called when they're set up, right? Every time the state machine for the player is set up, as it adds the states to that list in the state machine, it just calls the init function. And this one, we're going to need to be able to connect to our dialog system. And I'm going to hook one of these in here. We're going to need another one, but we have our dialog system. It's got a signal for when the dialog is finished. So I'm going to say dot finished and then connect. And then we'll just have an on dialog finished. And then this is obviously the method, right? Pretty self-explanatory. Explanatory. How do you say that word? My brain has stopped working. Self-explanatory. What's going to happen here? We're going to have to come through and clean up all these errors, but let me just create this function. We'll come right back down here in a second. We're also going to want to connect to a signal that we don't have. In our dialog system, we don't actually have a signal when the dialog starts. So let's go ahead and add one. Let's see, we're in our dialog scene here because I opened that. Let's open this dialog system script. Okay. In here, we've got a signal for finished and when letter added. We really should have considered this, but let's add a signal for started. Okay. I think that's a good name for it. Oh, and I'm getting a bug or an error because of our state over here. So this should say started dot connect, and we'll say on dialog started. And let's create this function as well. Make it down here at the bottom. And just like that, we've got some new signals to hook to. We're not emitting that started signal yet. We'll get there later. But essentially what we're doing so far, right, is we're kind of setting up this state. This init is important because we need to be able to respond. We're going to let the state decide when it should be initialized and what it should do when the dialog ends. Okay, so we're going to kind of decouple them a little bit. You know, that our dialog system doesn't have to care what the player does so much. It's just going to emit this started and finished signal, and then our player will pick those up and handle them from within this state. We can come in here into our enter function, and playing the idle animation is fine. I think we'll just keep that update animation line of code there. I also want to update the process mode for the player. So we'll say player.process mode equals, and then we're going to say this always option node.process mode always. So that will effectively make him unpaused during a cutscene or a dialogue. I know this error is going to give us grief for a minute. And then we should do the opposite when we exit this state. We're going to go back to our regular process mode. So we're going to say process mode equals, and that's node.processMode inherit. Oh, lost my process mode options. There we go. Okay, that way he's pausable again once we exit this state. So we have to be careful when we enter this state and when we don't. We don't have to be super careful though, because this state is more or less paused, but he's still going to be animating. So like his cape will flap or whatever idle animations you have, he'll be doing that just by virtue of using this state. And then of course we can trigger other animations and they'll play. Okay, so there's our enter and exit. And really the only other thing that this state needs to do is probably set our velocity to 0. Just like that. We can do that in our process function. That's the standard way we've typically done it. Our physics loop can be empty. Our handle input should be empty as well. And there we go. Aside from the fact that these onDialog started and finished aren't hooked up, we've pretty much done everything we need to. But since we're here, we can go ahead and do this as well, because this is super straightforward. What we're going to do is when we get the onDialog started signal, then this node is going to do what we've done like with our stun state. It's going to tell the state machine, hey, switch to me. I'm the next state. So we'll go state machine dot change state self. Okay. And then likewise with onDialog finished, we'll trigger a state change as well. We'll say state machine dot change state, and then we'll pass in the idle state, just like that. Okay. Now that's completed. We're not going to need to touch this any further unless for some reason it's not working, but it should be working. So with that, I'm going to kind of close the player, this idle state. Probably don't need this global player manager. I'm just going to clean these up real quick. Okay. These other scripts we might want to leave open, but there we go. Make sure that yours matches. It's going to be a very simple state, cutscene, reference to the idle, some connections to the start and finished in our dialog system, really simple enter and exit functions, stopping our velocity so we have no movement, and voila. These two onDialog started and finished. That's all you need for this. Okay, so once you get that working, I mean, it should do nothing, right? If I run the project, if I run this scene, nothing should happen. It's not going to affect our player just yet. Okay, but it's just in there, ready to use. The next thing we should do is let's continue to do some of this groundwork. We're going to go to our dialog system, and we need to make sure that we're emitting the started signal at the appropriate time. Otherwise, none of this is going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and just find this. We've got a show dialog function. So I'm going to navigate to show dialog. And the timing or the placement of this is somewhat important. We do have some potential to maybe not make it into this. I don't know. Actually, looking at the show dialog, I think we're actually pretty safe. So long as we put it maybe up here before we do this if-else statement. So maybe right after we pause the game, I will emit that signal. So we're going to be saying started.emit. And that's it. That's all we have to do here to make this work. Okay. Now, I think what'll be interesting is let's go ahead and run this. I'm not sure if this is actually going to work yet, but previously we should have, in fact, let's do this. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to comment that out. Oh, I commented out the wrong thing. What am I doing? Okay, let's take this. I meant to put this underneath. Somehow I got myself all discombobulated. Okay, I'm going to comment this out real quick and let's run this test. The player's cape shouldn't be flapping. Yeah, he's paused. You can see that, right? It's pretty obvious that the player's paused. Looks kind of goofy like that. Let's go ahead now and emit the started. Here we go. Now with this in place, the player nicely idles during a cutscene, okay? That's all it does currently, but now we can manipulate him and it's gonna let us do stuff, okay? Go ahead and save all this, and then next we'll move on to that cutscene action. Okay, so let's dive into this now. We've got our CutsceneActionPlayer script that we've already set up, but it's just mimicking the move one, and so we need to go through and kind of update this and change it a little bit, right? Let's go ahead and just go through this. We're gonna keep our enum for these method types. We want to keep probably most of these export variables. We certainly want timing method. We don't need object to move anymore. We can keep the transition type and easing method as well. Now this move duration and speed, we'll keep those. Animation speed factor, we'll want that as well. I'm going to set this by default to 200 because that's kind of like the move speed that we're going to have on our player. And that's the most common action that we're going to use this to take, at least right now. So I'm going to keep that as well. So just looking at this, we need to export a few more things. We're going to need to provide like an animation name so that we can trigger an animation on our player. Like if we're going to move him, then we should have him play the walk animation. And so let's go up here and let's export some of these first. Export variable. We're going to call this animation name, which is a string. And by default, we'll set it to walk, which is all lowercase. Okay. I also want to have a direction so that when we're done with this movement of the player, we can tell them which direction to face. Otherwise, we're going to kind of be at the mercy of the animation and the walk direction. And that might not always be what we want. And just ignore these errors for right now because we've deleted some variables. Those are going to pop up for a bit until we clean them out. So let's go ahead and export a variable. And actually, I want to do a special type. There's an export enum. And what this allows us to do is provide, you can see here, some strings, some different names so that we can select from a predefined list of strings. Okay, so we're going to have like up, down, left, and right. Just like that. Okay, so those are the options for this export variable. Now we define the export variable, and we'll call it like finish direction. That's kind of a weird name, but whatever. String, and by default, I'm just going to set it to up. I don't really care. Now, because we have this new cutscene action to move the camera that removes the camera from the player, I want an option here. I want to make it optional if we want the camera to refocus on the player or not. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to just export a Boolean to control that. So export var, we can call this reset camera to player. It's a Boolean and we'll set it to true by default. I think we generally might want to do that. I don't know. One last variable, I'm going to put it down here with the animation speed factor, and that's going to be a Boolean, whether or not we even want to scale the speed. So otherwise we'll leave it alone and just set it to, speed scale of 1. I'm going to go for the whole long name. We're going to call it scale animation with movement, and we'll set it to true by default. Okay, there we go. So those are our new export variables that we're going to use for this cutscene action. Okay, let's look further down the script. We've got some variables here. We've got a target location, a move direction, and a distance to target. These are all good. We can keep these because we're going to make this one of the primary functions of this action, right? I think the only thing that we need to add here is a start location. Let's go ahead and do that. This maybe is not super needed, but it will be useful. And we'll just set it to vector20 right now. In our start or in our ready function here, we're setting our target location to the global position of this node. That's good. We want to continue to do that as well. And man, we're getting lots of errors in our console. I think it's time that we start cleaning that up, don't you think? First of all, if we have an object to move, we're going to go ahead and delete that if check. We don't need this here. We are going to want to calculate a distance to target. I'm going to go ahead and remove this. And in fact, this distance to target, I'm going to comment this out. We're going to do this slightly differently, but we do want that eventually. Okay. This timing method code here is great. I'm just going to indent it one so that it's at the correct level within our code. We don't need this NPC code here. Delete all that. This tween, we'll keep the tween. Let me just indent it again. Get rid of that pass. This else, we don't need that. Now, we shouldn't need that fail condition because we should always have a player. Otherwise, how would you even start a dialogue, right? So I'm going to go ahead and keep it as is. And then let's just comment out this line right now that's giving us an error on the tween. We're going to come back through this, obviously, and update this because we're going to be tweening the player, not the object to move. But the rest of the code's good. Let's just look at the rest of this and see if we need this. And actually, we don't really need most of these. We're not going to, this is basically one line of code. We're just going to do that in line. Calculate distance to target, same, just get rid of that. On tween finished, we don't need any of this code here. We'll need the finished emit. We're going to do more as well, but we'll come back and we'll finish this on tween finished once we've gone through and done the rest. And then let's just wrap up this draw code down here, and we'll just make it a green color so that it matches our new icon, right? And so I'm going to just pick some colors here kind of at random. This is our center dot. So let's get this yellow-green, and we could pick one if we want to, but it's kind of fun just to pick a predefined green. I'm going to pick a darker green like the lime green. Voila, save it. This should be able to clear these. I'm going to go ahead and clear our console, and that way we'll know if we have new errors that we're introducing instead of being distracted by that. Now, if I look at this cutscene here, we've got... Hey, that's supposed to be green, bro. Let's go ahead and save this and reload the scene. Reload save scene. If you don't save it first, then it won't work. There we go. Now it's green. It's only going to do that draw correctly, once the script initializes usually. So once it's kind of already started, we're sometimes a little bit too late to get that working. There we go. We've kind of cleaned up all the errors from this script. And so now it's time to go through and code up the correct or proper play function that we're going to use for our player. Okay, so what do we need to do in the play? We're basically going to be doing the same things that we've done. We're just going to be doing those operations on the player now. So we'll tween the player so we can move him. It's kind of obvious from what I've added here that we do also want to allow us to set an animation. And so we'll play the animation. Once we're done, we're going to make sure that the player faces the correct direction. We've got some handling of the camera that we may need to do in there and things along those lines. But for the most part, this is going to be pretty straightforward, especially when compared to what we've been doing with the other cutscene actions. So let's start in our play method. The first thing we need is we need to get a reference to our player. Now, the player automatically enters this cutscene state, and so he's kind of already configured and he's ready, but we still need to be able to do things to him, like maybe set his animation and things like that. So we're just going to say our player, make sure we strong type that. And we're just going to grab it from our player manager, like so. That's just going to make it easier so we don't have to type player manager.player everywhere we access him, right? And then we need to get our start location, which is going to be the current global position of the player. So start location equals player.global position. We can calculate the distance to target now. I'm going to go ahead and remove this function call. And instead, our distance to target is going to be the start location, distance to, and then in here, we just need to provide our secondary vector 2 that we want to look for, and that'll be our target location, okay? Which, we've kind of already handled that here in our ready function. Okay, we've got start location, distance to target. We also need to get a move direction, the direction that the player is going to be moving. This is important for the animation, or at least for the directionality of the player himself. So move direction will equal, and then we can it's basically the same code we did here, but instead of getting a distance to, we'll get a direction to. So we'll say start location dot direction to target location. Okay, now we've got a move direction. Now, this isn't going to yet do a whole lot, but let's go ahead and assign or use some of these values right now. We can manipulate the player just a little bit at this point. So we're going to grab our player first, and we're going to set his direction. So we'll say direction equals move direction, right? Because our player does have a direction value or property that controls his facing and velocity and things like that. So we'll set that direction. And then there is a function on our player that we're going to want to call. In fact, it's set direction. And what this will do is it'll go through and it'll update some of the variables, like the directionality that affects his animations, up, down, left, right, and so on. So we'll call that. And then let's go ahead and just call the player.update animation. And we'll provide the animation name that is an export variable on this script. So if we're looking at this scene right now with what we've done so far, he should enter the walk animation, and he should also face the direction of the target. So our target is this green target here. I'm going to say that let's just go ahead and move it up here to the left. That way we know if we're facing right talking to the NPC, we should then face the other direction. So let's just test that out. And he should start playing the walk animation as well. Yeah, there we go. And he's actually facing up was, I guess, the most appropriate direction to face. But our player is stuck in the walk animation and nothing else is happening. So clearly we have more work to do. Before we get into much more of the code, what I want to do is I want to handle the animation timing, the speed, I guess. We've got this, and I'm reading this and I'm saying the wrong word. So we've got a timing method that we use for the tweening of the movement, but we need to maybe correspond that to the animation player, right? And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make an if statement, because remember, we provided a Boolean if we even want to do this to begin with, and it's called scale animation with movement. Okay, so if that is true, then we're going to do a little bit of code and update the animation scaling of the player. So what we'll do is we'll calculate that scale. So we'll call it an anim speed scale maybe. And this is going to equal our move underscore speed by our animation speed factor. Okay, so we can kind of control these with these different things in here. And actually, you know what? We need to move that underneath this check here, don't we? because we can potentially change the move speed with this line right there. So here we go. Put that down here. Okay. So we're going to calculate this animation speed scale. And then simply what we need to do now is just find our player's animation player and set the speed scale there. So we'll just go player, since we have a reference to him. And we do have a reference to our animation player. So we'll just set the speed scale equal to the anim speed scale that we just calculated. Oops. There we go. And we're good. And then of course, if we uncheck that Boolean, right, which is down here, then it just won't happen. Now let's go ahead and before we test this again, let's update this tween. So what we're going to be tweening is going to just be our player. And we're going to just be using the same values. We'll tween the global position to the target location over the move duration, which we're calculating and or setting. Okay. Now, I guess what we've got, yeah, this is all set up. So once previously we didn't have this tween property happening. So the tween callback was firing pretty much instantly. That's why it still continued to finish previously, but now it's actually going to wait for the tween to happen, right? So let's go ahead and test this again and see how it plays out. Oh, that seems broken. Oh my gosh. Okay, turbo player, calm down, buddy. Okay, did we do something wrong when we calculated this? Let's see, I've got a timing method set to duration, and then we've got a really quick move duration. So maybe that's appropriate, actually. Let me set it to speed instead of duration. So we've got a move speed of 200, which matches our typical movement speed for our player. This one should look better. So maybe it wasn't buggy aside from the fact that the animation never stopped. Oh my gosh, kill me now. What on earth is going on with this? Let's see. Scale animation with movement, true. Oh, look at this animation speed factor. I had hard coded that as 200, but I had created this node before we did that. So it was set at 40. That better be it. Otherwise, I'm really stumped. Let's go ahead and test this yet again. Oh, okay. That felt better. Much better. Okay, that's exactly what I expected to happen. Okay, so it's not buggy, it's finicky. This animation speed and the movement speed and all of that stuff is pretty critical to how this feels. So this will require some trial and error, but the default values that we've entered here, this animation speed and the walk animation, they kind of tend to line up and sync up with how we animate the player in the game. So depending on how you use this, you may or may not encounter weird animation issues. Obviously, he's still walking when we finish the animation, so we need to come down to our on-tween finished, and we need to add some code here now. Now, before we emit the finished signal, let's do a couple things. Let's go ahead and grab a reference to our player again. We're not saving it in here, so it's fine. We only need it twice in the code, so we'll just grab it again. So this equals player manager.player. Right, so grab a reference to our player so that we can do a couple things on him. I think the first thing that we should do is we may need to update the animation speed scale. So let's go player.animationPlayer.speed scale. And we'll just set it back to 1. Okay. That way, if we did set an odd value, it'll reset. The other thing I want to do, since we're here looking at the on-tween finished, is we've got this finish direction, and I actually want to set that in here. Right, so that we can control which way he faces when he finishes this animation. And what we need to do is we need to set the direction. So let's make a function for this actually, real quick. Let's make a function just to kind of get this code separated. And I'm going to call it get facing direction. This could then be used later on if you need to. And this facing direction is a vector too, so that's what the function will return. Okay, just like that. And what we'll use is we'll use a match statement in here. So we're going to match our finish direction, is what we called it, and return a different result depending on the direction that's selected. So up is one of those options. So if it's up, then we simply return vector2.up. And now you've probably guessed what we're going to return for the other. So I'll go ahead and just type this out and you can follow along. Now you'll notice that once we finish this, we've got our up, down, left, and right. It still says that not all code paths return a value, so we're getting that annoying little error. We can handle this in a couple ways. We could return something down here, or we could put a default state, which I think this is worth doing just so that you can learn it if it's new. but we can do _: in our match, and then this will become the default condition in case none of our options match any of these. Then we'll still do something here. Then we can say return, and I'm just going to pick vector2 up as the default, like that. Okay, so there we go. We've got this get facing direction function. Now what we can do up here in our onTween finished is use that function to set the direction on our player. So we'll say player.direction equals get facing direction. And then we want to call the player.setDirection function. And lastly, we'll do the update animation. Now, if you want, you could provide an export variable for this animation, but I'm going to default this to be idle. I'm going to assume that I always want it to go to idle afterwards. And now we can emit the finished signal. We're not quite done with this, but we're pretty far. So let's test this one more time. There we go. We had up selected. Let's go ahead and try this again. Let's pick right. Okay. And run this scene and see if our player should face right when he's done. Boink. There we go. Pretty easy peasy. So now we've got the ability to do all these. Now I want to just show something. Let's take this camera cutscene action and move it up the list. So that first the camera will move and then the player will move. In fact, I want to make sure that the player move is actually clear over here. I'm going to have him face left. And then this first camera move, I'm going to put it clear to the left so that we should have a pretty obvious issue here. So when we run this, now we should see that the player is going to kind of be off camera, right? He's going to run way off. Of course, we had another camera pan that brings it back, but maybe we want the camera to follow the player when he's doing that. Okay. And so that's what this option is for here. Reset camera to player Boolean. Right now it's on, so obviously in that case we want it to reset to the player. You maybe want that where the camera stays somewhere and the player walks off screen. You can keep that, and so that's why we're going to make this optional, right? So looking at our script, here's how we're going to handle this. Let's go up to our play function, and just right down here, when we start doing all of our timing and all that stuff, we're going to do an if check. So we're going to say if reset camera to player, then we'll just do that. And we actually have a function that we built in our previous video, right? So we have player manager dot, and then it's reset camera on player. Okay. And so now if we run this scene, we should see that it will reset to the player. It'll move over to him. Now, it was really janky there, and I didn't like that. And this is a flaw in how we implemented it in our last video. So even though it kind of was working, and I'm going to go ahead and remove this other camera movement here. In fact, I'm going to remove quite a bit of this stuff. The reset to camera is kind of hard and harsh, right? And so let's go ahead and refine this a little bit. Now, really what I would like to do is instead of setting the camera position, let's go ahead and tween it. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this an option so that we can provide a tween value, and we'll make it so it has a default so that we don't have to provide a value. And any place you've called this previously will continue to work. So we'll just say tween duration, and this is a float, and I'm going to set it by default equal to half a second. So 0.5, just like that. Okay, so down here where we reparent the camera and then set the camera position, we're going to replace this with a tween. Okay, so let's just say variable tween is a tween, create tween, right? And then I'm just going to hard code this. You could make this variable if you want, but I think the easing and transition types will just set to a standard here. So I'm going to set the ease to probably ease out. Okay, and you can pick which one you like, ease in, ease out, or ease in out might be a good one. If you don't like ease in out is probably the way to go, because that'll smooth it at the beginning and the end of the tween. And then let's set our transition. So set trans. And I think the transition type that we want here is this trans quad. I'm going to go down and find that. Yeah. And then lastly, we'll just call the tween property. And we're tweening the camera. And we want to tween the position. And we want to tween that to vector2.0. Because essentially what's happened is it's no longer at the 0, 0 of our player. And we need it to snap to that. And in this case, we want it to move to that. And then we'll just use our tween duration as the final value of that tween. Okay. There we go. So now if we run this one more time, we should get a smooth transition. And I mean, it didn't seem to fully catch up with him, but there we go. We've now got a way to reset the camera on our player with a bit of a tween so that it looks a little bit nicer. And in fact, let me go back and just test that one more time, and let's make sure that this is working as I expected, because I'm not sure if it was. I thought it was, but yeah, he kind of moved the camera just a little bit. Okay, there we go. I'm thinking what's happening is that the camera tweened its position, but it's paused, so it didn't move to the player. So we need to do this. We need to stop this, and let's go to our player, or I'm sorry, let's go to our player movement thing. And then in this case, we just need to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab our camera here, actually. Let's do this. So let's say var camera, and let's go ahead and get a reference to our camera. We need to make sure that our camera process mode is enabled. Otherwise, it's not going to do its own movement, right? That auto follow that it does when the player moves. So we use that get viewport. There it is. That get camera 2D. And then we'll do camera.process mode. And we'll just set it to the always process mode, okay? And then I take these two lines, copy them, and assuming we don't need that anymore down here, I'm going to go ahead and just reset that. Oops. I had it copied, but I accidentally copied blank piece of line of code. There we go. We'll set this back to inherit, just like that. And I think this should round it all off. Let's give this one last whirl here. Player will move. I don't know. I think the camera didn't catch up to him by the time he stopped, but regardless, let's try this. Let's just try this. Let's see. I feel like we should almost just set the camera to always process mode. Okay. That works better. See, now you can see it went all the way over because it's revealing the edge of the grass there. Yeah. Okay. So what's happening is we were still setting the process mode to inherit before it even finished. I'm going to let you decide what you want to do there. I'm going to think about it, but I think what I would prefer is that the camera process mode is just on always, because I can't think of a reason why we wouldn't need it to be. And then you don't even need to do some of that line of code, right? We wouldn't even need to set this camera process mode to always. Once we get a cutscene, I guess it's just going to happen, okay? And then it's going to stay that way until something changes the process mode off, which we do have some code that might do that. So we can leave that and let it be. But otherwise, I think this is looking pretty good. All right, so things are working pretty good. This video is not the last with this cutscene. There's a couple things I want to do. We're going to do some polish with this. We're going to add the ability to maybe cue some music when you enter a cutscene. And someone mentioned adding like black bars to the top and bottom like it's a cutscene. We'll go ahead and do that as well and have a little bit of fun with this. And then we'll also add an area trigger so that you can trigger a cutscene / dialogue just by walking into an area. That way you don't have to interact with an NPC to get it to start. And then with that, we'll have really all the basic building blocks that you'll need to make this cutscene work for you. So thank you for following along. Go ahead and drop a comment if you've got some. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. And as always, we'll see you next time.